This tutorial will be about UrlFetchApp, and it's basically an interface that allows you to do requests to URLs and fetch data out of them. So you can think about it like an AJAX request or something like that, I guess. So and I'll be using this website fixer.io that gives us foreign exchange rates, currency rates, and I'm not really sure if this data is correct that comes out of here, but that's kind of not the point of what we're trying to do here. So if we go to their API point over here, you'll see that if I go to this URL, I have this latest prices, and we have to provide the base currency. So right now, if I have euro as my base currency, I'm basically getting exchange rates for euro and all of these different currencies. Now if I go back and change this to, for example, USD for US dollar, I'm gonna get exchange rates for US dollar. So we can see how we have different currency rates. So we should also have euro probably somewhere in here. If we keep going down this list, there it is, it's the last one. So we can see the rate for exchange, and this is JSON as the format of the data. Now if you're looking at this with your regular browser, you probably don't see this nicely formatted like this. You may see it looking like this, and what I have a little extension installed. It's called JSON Formatter, I believe, for the Chrome browser, that gives me this nicer visual representation of my JSON, but it really doesn't matter. You can really use this. It's just a little easier and nicer to look at it this way. So this is the data we're going to parse. So what I want to do, I want to get to the point where I can create a function in my Goole Sheets that's basically going to import JSON data to the sheets. And we're going to start by exploring this UrlFetchApp interface and see what it looks like. So I'm going to copy that to remember that. I'm going to go back. I have a plain and empty spreadsheet here. So I'm going to go under Tools, Script Editor. There it is. That's going to be our first function. So I'm going to start with my UrlFetchApp and dot, and this will be some methods that we can access. So the first one is our fetch method is going to return an HTTP response. So I'm going to go ahead and select that method. So if we go documentation, you see that what we have to provide is the URL from which we want to fetch our data. So, and if we scroll down, we're going to see an example here where we fetch the data out of there. So, and you see how after it returns the response variable, we have to get the content text out of it. Okay, so fair enough. So I'm going to go back and pretty much replicate this code only with our URL. So instead of typing URL here, for now we'll just provide that URL, which will be this one. So I'm going to copy, go back and paste it here, and we have to store it in a variable. So I'll just call it var res for response equals this, semicolon to end the line. So that's going to be our first line. The next thing we want to do, we want to basically create another variable, which is going to be basically the content returned. So I'm going to do our content equals to, and I will basically get this res variable, the response, and what I need to do, I want to get the content as text, which is this one. So it returns a string as a result. So there it is. So semicolon to end that line. So then what I want to do, I want to just basically log this to see what I got. So logger log, and I'm gonna do that content. semicolon. And since we're on this, maybe we can just log the res as well to see what we get in it. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. I have to give this a project. So I'm going to say import JSON. That's my project name. Fair enough. Hit OK. Now I'm going to run this script. So I'm going to go run this. So now we have to grant permission to access my Google data, review permission. So I'm going to choose the account I'm going to use, and I'm going to go ahead and allow. Okay, so that ran. Let's take a look at this. So it returned this, which is text, and apparently it just logs out this part as text as well, even if you use the response object that we have. But this is what we're really going to use right here. So I'm going to take this response object out, but basically what we were able to do so far by doing what we just did is when we look at this log, and what we get as a return is what we basically had here from the API. It just looks like row like this. So we're able to actually get the data from this other website, which is good. So now at this point, what we're going to do, we will have to convert this text content that we have to a JSON. So we'll do our JSON equals to JSON parse and content. So if that works out well, then we should be able to get different parts of that object. So for example, in this logs, oops, let me get this out for a second. So if we look at those logs, the first thing is base, which should return USD. And then we have a date that returns the date. Then we have our rates. So if I take the base, so let me try to access that. So we have the JSON, and we're going to do the base. That's going to be var base, I guess. Why not? And let's log that out. Logger.log base. Save this with Command S or Control S. Go ahead and run this. Let's see what we have. So I'm going to go back to my logs, and you can see I was able to access USD. So basically what happened here, just to explain you what it means, at this point we're getting that response, this, as text here back. But what we need to do, we'll have to parse it as JSON. So we have to make our JavaScript object notation here so we can start accessing different parts of that. And we can do this with this Json Parse, which is a built-in functionality of JavaScript. Basically, that's also available in our Google Spreadsheets. So we're parsing that to a JSON object, and then we can now access different parts. So I can get the base by doing this. So I'm getting the JSON base, which is the USD, which is basically this base is the USD. Now, if I do the date, I'm going to get the date here, right? So there it is. So date, save. I go ahead and run this. And if I lock that out, so you see how we get the date. Now, what if I want to get the rates, right? So when we see there's no one rate, it's a bunch of rates in it. So if I do rates, and this should stay the same, it's fine. So I'll save this, run this. Now, if we see the log, basically we get all of that as one. Now, we probably don't want to have all of it. What we want to get is basically the conversion. So let's say we want to get the euro rate. So I'm going to go here and do my rates, and then I'm gonna do another set of square brackets and do that. Save this, run, and looking at our logs, there it is. So I was able to get to the price in euro right there. So far so good. So far this is very basic. I was able to get to the rates and then get to my euro. Now what I need to do, I have to really convert this to a function that I'll be able to use. So I'm gonna move that whole thing to a function. So I'm gonna create a function, and I'm gonna call this function Json init for now. Probably not the best name for this function, but that should do. So I'm gonna pass a URL to this function. So because I don't want this URL to be the same all the time, because I want this function to be an import JSON function that's gonna use on different JSON data too, not just this that we have. So this is just a sample JSON that I'm gonna use, but I want it to be working on different type of JSON. So I'm gonna have to pass this URL, and the second part is gonna be whatever that person wants from this function. So in this case, that person is gonna want the rates and then get the euro out of their rates, or maybe they will want just the base, right? So that's gonna be our second part of what I'm gonna have to do. I'm gonna call that Xpath, although it's probably not gonna be Xpath, but that's a fine name, I suppose, for this. So for the most part, I'm just gonna copy this whole thing and paste it here. There we are. Now I'm gonna obviously replace this with my variable, which is called URL in this particular case, and we'll get our URL. This will stay the same. Then we'll parse it to JSON, which is right there. Now the next part is gonna be the Xpath that our user is going to provide, which is where I'm gonna access this and basically return the value I need to return, right? So first of all, instead of calling this base, let's just call it end res for end results, I guess. And let's just return end res. So that's what our function is going to return, the end results. Now, instead of doing this, well, first of all, I'm going to start with something basic. So if I just wanted to get the base here, I'll just do Xpath here for now, just to explain how this is actually going to work. So this is going to be Xpath that is going to return whatever that person provides here inside of this function, and that's gonna return that result. So I'm gonna save this. So let's go ahead and try this function now. So I'm gonna go here, go inside of my spreadsheet. I'll go ahead and use it. So the first argument that I have is the URL, which is gonna be this as a string. So it's fair enough, comma, and the second argument is the Xpath. So for example, base was one of those things. So I'll go ahead and close this, hit enter, and I was able to actually get that. So basically now the user can decide, you know what, I want to get this and I'm not gonna get the base, maybe I want the date. And we get the results. Now, when the user is going to have an issue is when they try to actually access this, right? Because if they just do rates, let's try that. Let's see what we actually get. So we get this. So it doesn't work. which shouldn't work. So far it's just one level thing. So we're getting inside of this, we're getting inside of that, and then we're getting here, right? So and that's the reason I call this Xpath, because we're gonna have the user to kind of provide what they want in Xpath format, although it's not gonna be 100% like Xpath, but I'm gonna call it that just for the sake of this particular tutorial or this function. So what I mean really by Xpath, so let's do a comment here. Basically what I want the user to do, I want the user to do something like, I want the what was it called? Rates. So I want the user to say, I want rates, and do another slash, and then provide, I don't know, some euro, for example, like that. And that way they should be able to get to euro. And if they do like this, they should be able to get the rate to the rates. And if there's like another level, inner level in our JSON, I want them to be able to do another slash and then provide that next level, whatever it's going to be. And this particular JSON example, we don't have any deeper levels, but we should create our function a way that it's going to work. So if we assume that the user is going to provide this in this particular format, what we need to do, we need to basically just split this text into multiple paths that we need to extract. So it's going to be rates, and then it's going to be euro. To split that, that's going to be this Xpath. So this we'll have to wait. So if we take that Xpath variable and use our split method, and we're going to split it using that slash, and I'll store this in a variable. So variable path array equals this. So we're going to split, and when you split by using this, you basically get an array, and your array is different parts. So for this, it should be like 2 splits. So the first one should be like an empty one, then we should have the rates, then we should have this euro. So let's see if that's actually true. So I'm gonna get logger.log, and I'll do this path array. And let's try to see what we actually get when we do this. Now the thing is that I'm not going to be able to really look at this way. So instead, I'm going to run it using this function. So and how am I going to do that? So instead of using all of this, I'll just say, let's do this. And this is going to be our Xpath, which is in the end of the day what the user is going to do. But right now I just want to test this out, right? So I'll save this. That's that. That's that. I'm going to run this to see what I actually get. So I'm going to run this my function, and apparently there's an error in my code. I have to see where it is. Line 19 apparently. Return end res. Oh, okay. So I didn't define what an end res is, and then I'm returning it. So I'm gonna have to comment out return line as well. And then let's go and look at our logs. So we can see that what we got is that array. So the first one is the empty, then we got the second one is rates, and the third one is this euro abbreviation we have. Okay, so far so good. So I was able to get that. So I'm thinking that we should make this easier, and for the first one we don't want to use this. We'll just do this, and we'll do like base slash, and then we'll do, well, in the case when we have something, it will be a rate slash something like that, right? So that way we'll get rid of that empty one. We'll just ask our user to put the path this way. So That's, I think, is a fair thing to ask. So there we are. Instead of us cleaning it up, although we could have done it, but it's not why we're doing this entire tutorial, right? So rates and euro, perfect. Now we're gonna have to get to that. So how are we gonna get to that? So the first thing we'll have to do, we'll have to get the first one, whatever it is, right? And then we'll have to return that result. And then inside of that, we're gonna have to access the next one. So just to explain you what I mean by this. So if I wanted to do this step by step, so the first one is if I did something like, let's get rates, and then inside of those rates, I want that euro, right? So on the next line in this variable, I would say, let's just get this. So this way I would get to what I need. Well, there's a quote here, but basically first I would do one level to get this object, and then I would return the second one out of that new object. So what I would need to do, I would have to basically get the first level, and then inside of that first level, go to get the second level. If there's a third level, I want to get to the third level until I get to the last thing that the user is asking for. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a loop. So for variable I equals 0, and we'll basically make sure that the I, it runs as many times as this. So if we have one slash, it will split it to two things array, so it's going to run it twice. If we have two slashes, it's going to run it 3 times. So we'll do that by basically just saying, let's take this array and get the length of it, semicolon, and I++. So that's my for loop, which will run as many times as we need there. And basically the first thing we want to do, we want to return the rates, which is going to be that basically if we access the rates, we're going to get this whole thing as a result, right? So we're going to, that the rates is going to be the first thing in here, which means it's going to be in this path, or not in path array, it's going to be in our JSON. It's going to be basically, this is where I want to have rates, right? Which is the first thing that we have. But instead of typing rates, I'm just going to get the first thing that we've split it in here in our path array. So here it's going to be path array, and on the first run is going to be that I, which is 0 in that particular case, and 0 is the first one in that array, and the first one is going to be rates after the split. So that's what we're going to do. And what I'm going to do, I'm simply going to put this back in a variable. So I'm going to say JSON, and JSON is already this variable that I have, right? So I already had that JSON. I'm going to take that JSON variable, and once I get the results here for the first one, which is basically going to be this new object we have, I'm going to assign that object to the same JSON variable right here. And at this point, the JSON, instead of being this whole thing, it's going to become this. Now, what that's going to let me do is when I come back and it goes to the next round, and now the I is going to be 1, and it's going to get the euro here. Instead, here it's going to be the euro. And now, because the JSON is this new object, it's going to look for euro in that object, and it's going to return us whatever the end result is. And basically, we'll keep running until we get whatever that result is that we want. So fair enough. Now we have our JSON object is going to keep turning until it gets us what we need. So in the end, we're going to return that JSON. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Now I'm going to go back and try that. So there it is. Now we get error. Now what I need to do, I have to do rates and slash something like euro. And we got the results. So if I go ahead and type something AUD, Australian dollar, where are we? There it is, 126. That's that. Now the whole point of doing this was that I was trying to make something that will also work for this, right? So if I just go ahead and type, instead of this, because I need just one level, I'm just gonna do base, and I'm still getting that USD. If I do date, I'm gonna get the date. So far I was able to import my data, and what I'm targeting is single element. So I was able to target single element here, or here, right? But I want to kind of make this function better in a way that I want it to be able to return a whole array. And what I mean by that is when the user types just rates here, so see, now it's just giving us nothing. And the rates is basically all of this entire object, right? I wanted to just spit out the whole thing to my spreadsheet row by row and column by column, right? I wanted to return this whole thing because that's the way we would anticipate something like import JSON will work. It will kind of return that whole thing as like divided in rows and columns so we can work with it. And that's going to be our next step. So what's going to happen is that when the user provides just rates, well, the split is really not going to split to anything else. So it's just going to return one thing, right? So as a result, what are we going to get? What we're going to get is basically that object. We get returned back this object. And because it's an object, we can't really just put it back in our worksheet. So what we will need to do, we will have to basically check if that's an object. And if it's an object, we'll have to convert it to an array. And then if we convert it to an array, then we'll be able to put it back to our sheets. I'm going to go here and I'm going to take this return statement out. So the first thing we want to do is run some checks. So what is it? Is it type off in JavaScript or is it just type? I think it's type off, but I think it's in lowercase. I'm going to try that to see what happens. Type off. So yeah, that turned into purple. So I guess that's, or whatever the color is. So I guess that's right. So I'm going to check the type of this returned JSON. And I'm going to check what type of object it gets. So first I'm going to check if it's undefined. And I suppose we can just do strict equals here. So if that's undefined, which means the user could potentially just enter something that's not even here, right? So we have to actually handle that. So if they enter something that's not even available, we have to return some sort of error message. So we'll say request not available. Or maybe we'll say node not available. I'm not even sure which one is worse or better, but doesn't matter. So we'll just return this text. So otherwise, else if, so we also want to check the next thing. So the next thing is going to be, we're going to check is that if the type of this thing is an object. I guess we should have to do this. If the type of that JSON is an object, what we have to do, we'll have to basically just go through the entire object and convert that object right here to an array. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go variable temp array equals this. So initially it's nothing. So what's going to happen when I get this object, I have all of these things in this object, right? So I could basically loop through this and push the results through my array. So here I'm going to make a for each loop. So for object in JSON, and for each object in our JSON that we have. So first of all, let's just log this out, right? Logger dot log that object, see what that is. Well, that object, it's a obj variable, so that's what I have. So to make this work, I'll have to request this, so it's actually an object. So let's see if it's able to actually get, if this is an object, and get into this loop, and hopefully we'll get the results. I want to run this function, which is my function, which is then in turn it's going to run this other function, then it's going to log this out. So I don't need to log out this anymore. I'll comment that out so we don't get extra junk on the screen. So go ahead and run my function. I'm gonna go now and check what's in my log. So what I get is basically a list of my currencies that I have, right? So I was able to, so this obj is basically our currency because we're running for each loop for our JSON. That's what we did. What I should be also able to do, if I do another logger.log, I'm gonna try to get inside of that JSON and do this. And what I'm doing here is that, because this is at this point is going to be one of those currencies, right? Like for example this AUD. So if I get inside of my JSON and get that instead of this AUD, I should be able to get the actual rate. So let's save this and run our function again just to verify that that happened. And there it is. See, we get this, then we had 1.64. So we're able to actually get all of those. Now what we need to do, instead of printing it in the log, we have to actually push it into our array. So this temp R variable, we'll push to that, and we'll push as an array into it. So the first one is going to be the actual currency, which is the obj, and the second one is going to be basically this. So I'm going to copy that and paste it here. So that's going to be an array that I'm going to be storing as a one thing in my array. So at this point, if I simply log this out, temp, hopefully I'll get my array. So let's see. So there it is. That's my array, and that's the first thing, the second thing, the third thing. So that's all good. So the interesting thing here is that we should be able to just return it to our spreadsheet, and our spreadsheet app will just automatically handle it, and it will just parse that array and put it in our spreadsheet. So let's just make this a little nicer. I'm gonna do this, so that's actually here. That's good. So I'm gonna kind of indent this a little more here for better clarity. Okay, save. Now let me go and check this out. Oh, so I didn't have to do anything. It actually already works. So I was able to return this entire array back just like that. So now getting back here, so let's actually try if this node not available works. So what if the user provides something that doesn't even exist? So maybe they want the base that's inside of the rates. Whoops, so it gets us nothing apparently. So that's interesting. I would have thought that should get us not available, but apparently it's not getting undefined here. So let's actually log the type of JSON here to see what's going on here. So let's get back here, and I'm gonna basically do what I did here. I don't want to change that, so I'm gonna save, run this. Let's look logs. It says undefined. Okay. Is it text undefined? Yes, so it's a text undefined, so node not available. All right, so we're able to handle that. That's good. So I'll comment this out. Now finally, so far I did this and I did the second one, but what if the person just wanted to get the base? What if it's just a single item? Or maybe just want to get the Australian or Euro rate only. We still want them to be able, so this is kind of works when they do rates, they get the whole thing. But if that person goes here and types like base, see, they get nothing. And if I do also like something like rates / USD euro, since we originally went with USD, see, it still doesn't work. So something that used to work, now it doesn't work. So that's because one case we handled for our if is when it's undefined. The other case we handled is when it's an object. Now we could do another else if and say if it's not an object, or I guess we could also at this point just say else. Instead of just doing else, I'm going to do else if actually. And I'll do if the type of my JSON is not an object, then I'll just return the JSON because it's just going to be the string. That's the end result. So we should be able to, actually let's match it with this, save this. So I'm going to go back now. That works. So if I just do rates, that works. Perfect. This one, I'll rename this to import JSON to kind of go with the format of Google spreadsheets where they do import XML or something like that. So here we'll go import JSON. Nice. So now we get that. If we just want to get like, let's say Great Britain pound, so GBP, that's all right. So no problem. So we're able to use the fetch API to go get some JSON data. We made a function, import JSON. Again, there is a lot of improvements that can be done to this function. It's something that's gonna get the job done at this point. I want to just add some comments to this. There we are. This one should be like this. So that's, what what we have, we're going to call this custom function. Import JSON data to your spreadsheet. Okay, let's just see if this works so far. So equals import JSON. So there it is. The new function shows up and it imports JSON data to your spreadsheet. Perfect. Now we want to add a little extra here. We want to explain what these parameters are and how to actually use them. So the first one is URL. Param. I believe it's called params, and it's either param or params. I keep forgetting if it's plural or not. So params URL. So it's gonna say URL of your JSON data as string. So see if that works. Import JSON. That didn't work because it continues this. So I'm gonna switch this to param. It's param1. Save. Import JSON. There it is. Now URL of your JSON data as string. So that's good. Now we also want to show Xpath. And let's actually just do something like this here. myapsite.com. So let's go back here and try that out. Import JSON. So that works. Now I'm gonna go back here and we're gonna have to do another parameter. And the second parameter is what we call an Xpath. We'll call it simplified Xpath. As string. Node 1, node 2. We should probably just do an example here of a function usage. So I'll do example import JSON. Instead of doing it here, maybe we'll just provide an example. Do something like city population. That should hopefully explain to the user how to actually use our function. See, it gives an example. Good. And nice notation here. And that should do it. So that makes our import JSON function using our UrlFetchApp. That was actually easier than I thought it would be, but again, there is a lot of improvements you can do, and there is one improvement that I'm going to do here. Because we're accessing external API and we're not sure how it's going to react to pulling data, because it could be that it will just, instead of returning something, maybe the site doesn't load or it returns an error or whatever it is. So a simple way for us to handle it is I'm gonna take this entire thing, I'm gonna cut this out, and I'm gonna put this inside of a try catch block. So it's gonna try all of this. There it is, and if it fails, I'll just say return error getting JSON data. Or just getting data. Okay, so apparently the try catch block syntax isn't right. So this is the drawback of using too many languages at the same time. So let's try it this way. Invalid catch block. So it should probably be like this. Okay, we could return this error, I guess. That's that. But I'm thinking it's too much, so just that should be good enough. For a regular user, we probably don't want to return that much detailed information. So otherwise you could have to return that or log that out. But that should do. So right now it should work exactly the same way. It's just now we have an extra precaution on a way if something goes wrong. So it's gonna try this, and if it fails, we'll go to this error. Okay, so hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Subscribe for my next videos.